hearing his voice. The challenge is not whether he still speaks. The challenge is that we don't know him enough to recognize his voice when he speaks to us. When we come to God, one of the biggest challenge is hearing him. I've had countless conversations with a lot of people that are trying to deepen their walk with God, and they ask questions like, okay, how do I know is God speaking? How am I sure I'm not the one talking to myself? So in this video today, we are going to be talking about 3 important things to note in order for you to discern the voice of God clearly and confidently. So the first most important thing to note is that God still speaks. God still speaks to us today. If you go to the book of John 10 from verse 27, it says that my sheep hears my voice. I know them and they follow me. So in order for you to hear his voice, that means that he still speaks. God is intentional about you, and that is the reason why he will speak to you, because he loves and he cares about you. It doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, what you've done, God still speaks. It doesn't change God. The things you're doing, in fact, how you're living your life, has nothing to do with the character of God. Like I said, he's intentional about you. He's intentional about me. That is the reason why he's always speaking to us. John said, it's only when we listen to him, that's when we know him, and that's when we follow him. But that doesn't change the fact that he still speaks. So let's just make that clear. So if your challenge is to know whether God still speaks, you can also go look at the book of Acts chapter 9 from verse 3 to 5. It was where Saul, who later became Paul, was on his way to kill the Christians, to cause more damage. And God stopped him right on his tracks, and he made a statement. He said, "Who are you, Lord?" Inasmuch as he knew that he was a sinner, but at the same time, he recognized that this is the voice of a higher authority. But the problem now and the challenge is that I don't know who this God is. I know that this voice is not a regular voice. I know that this voice is not somebody just speaking to me. This is a higher authority, but I do not know who this God is. And God had to now tell him who he is by saying that I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. So the problem is not whether God still speaks. He speaks. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter where you are in life. Like, God has equal love for all of us. The same way he loves the Pope, the same way he loves that person that broke your heart 2 years ago, the same way he loves that prostitute on the street, the same way he loves everybody equally. Yeah, there is no partial love. He loves all of us the same way. But when it comes to hearing his voice, the challenge is not whether he still speaks. The challenge is that we don't know him enough to recognize his voice when he speaks to us. So the second thing to note is that God's communication is not limited to humans' expectations, because I feel like the reason why we also struggle a lot is because most of us have put God in a box. Like, we are literally expecting God to speak to us in a particular way, and if he's not speaking to us that way, we are confused on whether he's speaking to us or not. I literally had a conversation with someone one day, and he said that he wants God to speak to him the same way he spoke to the prophets in the Old Testament. And I said, you're going to wait for a long time. Like, I don't even know whether you will see that in your lifetime. Because you don't even understand what these men carried. You don't even know their journey with God. You think God will just speak to you like that because of words, But that's not how it works. You can't put God in a box. You can't just say you expect God to speak to you this way. That is for people that don't want to hear God. Because God can speak through anything, through anybody. And I'm going to give you a very good example why I said this. Let's take Judas for an example. Whenever we talk about Judas, the thing that comes to mind is this wicked man that sold Jesus. We have a lot of things against him because the choices he made was horrible. So a lot of us condemn him a lot. But what if I told you that Judas was part of God's plan? You see why I said you can't put God in a box? Judas was part of God's plan for the redemption of mankind. Because God already knew that we are going to fall. Just so you know. Before he said, before the foundations of the earth, the lamb was slain. I think Revelation chapter 13 from verse 8. He said the lamb was slain. So Jesus already died before he actually died. God already knew that man is going to fail. Man is going to fall. So how are we going to redeem man back to God? How are we going to make this all work together? And it was through Judas, because if Judas didn't sell Jesus, there will be no betrayal, there will be no crucifixion, there will be no redemption. So yes, I know we see Judas as the bad guy, but Judas was part of God's wisdom. He was part of God's plan. God in his foreknowledge already knew that Judas is going to make this choice. And this choice is going to help restore man back to God. So he orchestrated redemption through that failure. So I'm just saying this to tell you that you cannot put God in a box. The intelligence of God is beyond human understanding. So God can speak through anything. He can speak through anything at all to you. Because he's intentional about you, he will make sure that he speaks to you in a way that if you are positioned the right way, if you're actually surrendered and listening to him, you will hear his voice. He can speak to you through the Holy Spirit. He can speak to you through your friends, through your family, through systems, through things. You can't limit God. So God can speak through anything at all. The book of Numbers, it was a story where God spoke to Balaam through a donkey, like literally a donkey. A donkey spoke like a human being to a prophet. Right? The same God spoke to a child in the middle of the night, Samuel. The same God spoke to a pagan through dreams. The same God spoke through the fire. You cannot limit God. Do you understand? God would always use what works. Okay, so having the expectations that God would only speak to me this way, and if he's not speaking to me this way, then he's not God, will keep you in a place where you would be stuck forever spiritually, because you can never hear God living your life like that. You have to understand that that is pride, because the reason why God put some structures and systems in place, the reason why God put some people in your life are for times like this. I can't count how many times I literally had something going on in my life, or like have questions, and a friend will call me and just start talking and start answering those questions, and I never even asked her. And I will get my answers, because I am positioned and I'm surrendered to the voice of God, not the vessel, right? A lot of us, if it's not coming from your pastor, then it's not God speaking. If it's not coming from this person, then it's not God speaking. That is not the way God speaks. God can speak through any vessel, right? He gave Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan, a dream for the whole city. He didn't say because God can speak to you through a prostitute. Yes, he can speak to you through anything. So the most important thing is to be surrendered to him, to his voice, not the person, or to the medium that he's speaking to you from, so that you can actually hear him when he speaks. So don't let human bias push you to miss divine encounters. Don't do it. Don't look down on people. Don't look down on anybody at all. Because wherever God positioned you to be, there is always a reason for that. And this will lead me to my third point, which is that God will always meet you where you are. God would always meet you where you are. That is the most beautiful thing about God. So many of us encounter God at very painful times in our lives. But God is patient enough to wait for us. For Saul, God didn't encounter Saul in the temple. Back to our human bias of where and how God speaks. It was not in the temple. That was not where God spoke to him. He was not praying. In fact, he was doing the opposite. He had a mission. He was on a mission to go kill Christians. And that was where he met God. So that's why I said you cannot put God in a box. He can speak to you anywhere, anyhow, through anybody. So Saul encountered God on his way to kill Christians. For Hagar, she was running away. She said, I'm tired. She was in the wilderness. She was done. In the midst of that confusion, in the midst of that pain, that was where God spoke to her, because God knew she's ready to listen. The same thing for Moses. Moses' one was even long. God let him, all the things that he went through, from being Pharaoh's son, to running away, to killing somebody, to getting married, to having kids, to everything. God was just waiting. And then the time came. And God said, now I need you. It is time. So God is not limited to any particular time at all. He's the one that, he said, before I formed you, I knew you. Like, I already know when. I know the best time to get you. I know when I have written that this is the time that I will need you. I know everything about you. So if you're waiting for him to speak to you through booming sounds and thunder and lightning, I don't know. Or if you're waiting for him to speak to you through a specific medium, I don't know how long you're going to wait for that. You have to pay attention. Pay more attention around you. Pay more attention to the people around you. Pay more attention to the Holy Ghost within you. Pay more attention to the systems and structures that are set in place for you, because you are there for a reason. And if you're not giving attention to that surrounding, it's going to take a long time for you to actually hear God's voice. So God will always meet you where you are. But are you surrendered enough to listen to him when he speaks? Are you willing to listen? Because he always speaks, but we are not just surrendered enough. We are not just willing to listen. And then we think that he does not speak. And the reason is because a lot of us want to jump into spiritual maturity. You don't even know the voice of God yet. Yes, I said God can speak through anything, but so does the devil. When God called Saul, who later became Paul, he didn't say, from here, start prophesying, or go into the city, start healing the sick. Or he said, go into the city. First step. First of all, he even made him vulnerable. He took his sight. Right? The one that was taking people's sight, now the table has turned. And then he gave him specific instructions to go into the city. And then when you get to the city, you will now be told what to do. God did not give him any assignment. God didn't tell him anything. Because the first thing first is to know God. That is the most important thing. Because once you know God, every other thing is easy. Every other thing will come naturally. It's just like a child that wants to eat beef when you've not even learned how to drink milk. God does not work like that. And your story is different from other people's story. So you have to make sure that you're not looking at other people. The same way that God called Saul was not the same way he called Peter. The same thing that God called Esther for was not the same thing he called Deborah for. So if Deborah was busy looking at Esther, for an instance, or Esther was busy looking at Deborah, they will not fulfill anything because they are looking at the wrong things. So it's the voice of God is what is most important. And before you get to that point, first you have to go through the stages. You have to first of all know this God, so that listening and hearing his voice can get much more easier. So the first thing I said is that God still speaks. God can speak to you. He speaks through anything. He can speak through anyone at any time. And he's not limited to our human expectations and biases of how he's supposed to speak or how he's supposed to sound. Imagine Balaam was listening to that donkey and was like, oh, this is not how God sounds. See how that doesn't sound right? So God is not limited to sound or volume. No, he can speak through anything. When God called Saul, He spoke to him concerning Ananias. Then he went to Ananias and spoke to Ananias concerning Saul. And Ananias was just like, you don't know this person? This guy is like, this guy will kill all of us. Why would you even speak to someone like that? And that is what a lot of us do. The same thing when Mary broke the alabaster box at Jesus' feet. The disciples looked at her like, this filthy woman. They had all those questions. They were just like, how would Jesus even let this woman touch him? The holy Jesus, the almighty Jesus. But little did they know that she was preparing Jesus for his burial. You see where I said that? We can't even comprehend what God is doing. So we can't put him in a box. Those your expectations are what is hindering you from actually hearing God. Because I believe that most of us hear God every single day. Through different things, through different people. But because we are not positioned in a place where we can actually listen to him, we feel like he's not talking to us. So the third thing is that God will meet with you where you are. In that your confusion, he can speak to you. In that your pain, he can speak to you. In that thing that looks like a fail, he can speak to you. As long as you're willing to listen to him, there's no limit to how God can communicate with you. So don't be deceived and do not let the bias and your expectations keep you from hearing the voice of God. If this blessed you, please leave a thumbs up. And I'm also going to make a part 2 of this video talking about the steps on how you can actually position yourself to receive instructions from God step by step, and the things that you have to also have at the back of your mind in respect to discerning the voice of God. God bless you, and I'll see you in my next video.